We are back and I am on the F750 BMW. Now this bike is an adventure bike, so this is more kind of geared towards those people that would buy maybe the 1300 or 1250, but maybe don't have the funds for the 1250 or the 1300, which costs about $30,000. This is under $10,000 to start. Now while this is a 2023 model, it's not going to be offered in the 2025 trims. You're only going to get the F800 and F900. What I'm going to say today applies to those models as well. Basically what we're going to be doing here is testing the 750, how it rides, how it feels up top. We're going to dyno test it, do 20 through 100 testing on the road for GPS. We're do all sorts of testing to see how it is stock, and then flashed using our custom tuning. We're also going to check those same exact variables and see exactly what the difference is, how it rides different, how it feels, how it dynos. Is there more power, is there less power, does it feel more clunky, how does the tip and feel? We go through a gamut of testing on these bikes. Now specific to the 750 here is we have the 850 model that was also offered in 2023 along with this. The funny part about this is they're both the exact same 853cc parallel twin motors in the 750 and the 850, but the power numbers are different. Why is that? Well, when BMW wants you to spend a couple thousand more dollars, what's the difference? Let's just throw the same motor in both of the bikes. I mean, we're talking, there's little differences in these motors, very small, negligible differences. Same camshaft, same piston, same everything else, except they electronically or through the software restrict this motorcycle, and that's where we come in. We come in and de-restrict this. So basically this should be the same power, more power than the 850 after we are done flashing this bike, because we can even get power to the 850 models. So this is kind of the cheat code for the 750. You flash it, you get the same power as the 850, and those that have a shorter inseam, this is a 32-inch to the ground seat as opposed to a 33.9-inch that comes to the 850, which a lot of people would consider a big selling point if they are a little bit shorter. Now of course, if this was the new 1300, that shorter wouldn't be a big deal. We have a full review on that one, and it actually has an electronic ride height controller. When you come to a stop, it electronically already just kind of lowers for you and raises back up when you start riding. An amazing machine, but like I said, about $20,000 more than this bike. And this bike comes with all the fixins as far as the basic necessities go. Even comes with this awesome 6.5-inch TFT that we've been seeing since the 2019 XR in the United States. Still a screen to this day, even coming to the 25 models, will still have the same screen for the M1000R, S1000R, pretty much all their SM series, the G series. They kind of use the same TFT for everything at this point. And it is an amazing piece that is still outshining all of the competition, in my opinion. Now this bike, for its class, it has things other bikes in this class do not have. The 6.5-inch TFT, electronic suspension comes in some trims here. There's a lot of things that you get on this bike that you don't get with the competition, but of course the BMW, you pay a little bit of a higher price. We even have custom accessories you can throw on the back here as far as the saddlebags go and all that. This is a pretty nice piece. I mean, it is comparable, in my opinion. It feels about the same as the 1300 does as far as just riding. The 1300 does feel a little bit more nimble than this bike, but as far as torque goes, we're talking 77 horsepower, a little over 80 Newton meters of torque, which means this thing's making more torque than it is horsepower. Let's see if we can get, I won't pick the tire up, but it's still got some amazing power. And this power basically from 2,000 to 5,000 or so feels insane, and then it kind of just lays over a little bit. It kind of feels like it's falling off. But how many people are taking this bike above that 5,000 marker? Normally it's a bunch of cruising. I will admit, if you're passing cars or something like that, you're probably going to drop a couple gears. We're going to see if we can fix that with the software though. This bike also gets over 50 miles per gallon. That's another thing we consider with our flashing as far as normal riding goes. You should be getting the same, if not better, gas mileage with our flashing service, which I know on these other bikes that are not sport bikes, that is a concern for a lot of people. Now with the power that's 77 horsepower, and we're talking about a bike that weighs a little shy of 500 pounds, which is about 100 pounds more than I'm expecting, about 100 pound or 100 horsepower shyer than I expect. I'm usually riding these sport bikes. So this bike to me is definitely underpowered and overweighted, but a lot of people will say for an adventure bike, it is definitely light for an adventure bike. This bike is also chain driven instead of shaft driven like you'd see on the 1250 or 1300. Again, that's more cost savings from BMW. It is going to be a little bit more maintenance, but nothing crazy. It's really not that hard to maintain a chain driven bike as long as you do your due diligence. They last for a very long time per chain. All right, hopping on the freeway here. Let's give it a little blast. Yeah. Feel all that power. So this bike makes 77 horsepower and a little over 80 newton meters of torque, which puts it about 10 horsepower and 6.7 pound-feet of torque shy of the 850, but they have the same engine. So all they do is restrict it to the point where if I'm commanding 100% throttle and I say, give me 100% throttle now, this engine is saying, this man wants 100% throttle, let's give him 40%. That's what it's saying. So our flashing, or the goal of our flashing, one of them is going to be to de-restrict the ECU, meaning when you command 100%, you get 100%. But also at the same time, we want to keep these ride modes usable. So let's go ahead and go over here into rain. We're in rain now. Oh yeah, this feels big sluggish. Now it's made for that so you guys don't crash while you're trying to ride. There's not too much torque input on the bike so you can slip out. So that's why it gives you some assistance in rain. Put this back in dynamic again. There we go, back in dynamic. Now I got some power. So right now I'm heading up to some top end stuff so we can feel what this bike is like above that 6,000 RPM mark and see how she truly feels with the restricted top end. Then after that we'll do our 6313 testing and then we're off to the dyno. All right, back here and we're doing some top end testing, seeing how the 750 does on the top end of the RPM here and how she feels. So I'll tell you right now, this thing feels lazy. It plateaus, there's nothing. Almost like 50% of the throttle has something and the rest of the throttle almost has nothing. Though the throttle transitions are smooth, the shifting is not. Definitely reminiscent of the 1250 and 1300. It upsets the balance in corners, like right there, trying to shift in through a corner. The brakes are actually pretty decent. I can attribute that to the Brembo anchors we have in the front here. Twin disc. It's definitely fun up until the mid-range and then it stops being fun. Now let's see what first gear tip in here. Wow, that's actually really nice. It's not an on-off switch. It doesn't care about bumps. That's a very, very, very nice throttle with tip in. And they're definitely advancing the throttle a little bit for the latter half. Actually not bad. Let's see what kind of speed we can get out of here. Come on, baby, you can do it. This is everything she's got. Everything. Not bad. For a bike that's under 10,000 bucks, honestly not bad. Braking, really not bad. Definitely a huge restriction. Massive. It's almost like the last half of the throttle is almost useless. And the throttle response on the first half of the throttle is very good. Very good. The torque luckily carries you through turns so you don't have to shift a crazy amount. So definitely some fun there. But definitely a lot of things I'm seeing that could be changed for the better. This bike could be a lot more fun than it actually is. Like the 1300, I can go post-flash with the stacks and everything, have a blast up there in the turns, and then just go back to a very civil, upright position bike. It's almost laughable how fun the transition is between just a cruiser and how it is being aggressive through turns and how flickable that 1300 is. This reminds me of that. This reminds me over a 1250 more than that 1300 because that thing is so flickable at 1300. So I think it's gonna do it for the top end here. Let's go ahead and see what that 20 through 100 is. I know this bike will not hit 130, so we're gonna do the 20 through 100 testing, see what it is pre-flash. Right here for the pre-flash, 20 through 100, 750 GS. Let's do it. we did a 9.6 20 through 100. This bike, even though the power to weight ratio isn't quite there, for what you're getting for a little shy of $10,000, this is a great package. We felt the tip ends to the top end right there that the bike is really well planted. The only thing that's upsetting is that clunky quick shifter up and down. And we're getting this weird flat spot in the power above 55 or 5,000 RPM. The clutch does feel spongy. I wish there was a bit more pressure there to kind of feel my way through the clutch, but it does feel very spongy. Now I'm going to be taking this thing to the dyno right now, and I'll be logging gas mileage, a few other things on the bike. Again, we do 100 miles stock and 100 miles flashed, and that's to ensure that we're getting a complete overview of how the bike feels stock and how it feels flash. Now if flash for some reason feels less than stock in any aspect, it's back to the drawing boards, because we don't want to give you guys an unfinished product. That's why we do all this testing. That's why we do hands-on testing. Testing on a dyno is great, but real world testing is going to trump the dyno number, because nobody races a dyno sheet. Nobody says, oh, my bike feels great in the dyno. It's a real world test. So the dyno is going to help guide us what the bike likes and doesn't like, but overall we're going to be testing this thing in the street to make sure that all those changes equate to something that makes you smile. So let's get this bike over to the dyno and see what kind of numbers she can make, and then get her back on the road for that post-flash review. Alright guys, I'm back here at Lee Cyclists, our dealer in San Diego, so if you need any BT Moto stuff, contact them directly. I have the 750 strapped to the dyno right now, ready to make some pulls here and see if we can do stock versus flashed. Let's get it. All right, all wrapped up here with the 750, and you'll see there's some components here missing from this bike right now, and actually we had to remove the seat to get to the ECU, because this is an ECU only flash at the moment. We're working on handheld, but ECU only flash right now. So I'm gonna make a video on how to pull this thing apart. It's actually pretty easy to pull the bolts out of this thing and get to the ECU. Now looking at the actual numbers here, let's check it out. We got stock in blue, red of course is our flash. Now, we're looking at almost a 25 wheel horsepower increase at peak RPM here. That's pretty crazy. And if we're looking at the actual peak numbers here, just peak to peak over the entire RPM range, we're a little shy of 20 wheel horsepower, but still that's an impressive gain right there for this bike. Anything over basically right here, we're starting to carry away, which is right around 4,700 RPM. We really just start making crazy gains over that stock line. This really has to attribute to the 40% throttle that we get on the 750 stock. So stock, this bike is 40% throttle up here. This is all 40%. So we de-restrict it. Now let's talk about what a lot of people don't talk about in these bikes. It's torque. Now look at the torque here. Peak says we're only getting 3, but that's not the whole story. Look at this. So red, keep in mind, our flash, blue is not flash. So here we go. This is all the torque right here. It starts separating big. Now look at this. That's 39 wheel torque to 53 wheel torque. So 53, 39, that's a massive gain in torque, although even just the peak numbers say 3, so that doesn't seem impressive there, but when you're up top here, 62, 49, that's a massive amount of torque you're getting right there. So definitely a lot more overall power for the bike, not just horsepower, but torque as well. Now, other than de-restricting, we do quite a bit of other things to the bike here. We've got engine fan cooler temps, we've got better throttle response, we've also got full-time closed loop here because we've got the wideband narrowband there, so we've got a full-time closed loop system. We've also revised the startup of the bike itself to be a little more smoother on that startup. And I'll go over my ride impressions on our ride here, but overall, this is a pretty impressive gain for the 750. So I think it's time to get on the bike now, and let's go over my impressions of how the bike feels flash. We'll do all the same things we did in the first pre-flash video with the post-flash video. What's up guys, I'm back in the 750 post-flash now, and I can tell you, I've been riding this bike for about 50 miles, and it is completely changed. This is a brand new bike. The speed up top now. Look at this thing, it just climbs and climbs and climbs. If I go to a lower gear even, so 5th gear, more power. Anything above 5,000 RPM that was like a dead stick before, now has a lot of power, and it makes sense because we're getting in some cases we're getting a little over 20 wheel horsepower in the RPM range, above 5,000 RPM. These are insane gains. I mean, literally we had restricted down to 40% this bike, and then we open up to 100%, and above 5,000 RPM this bike comes alive now. Downshifting, it is actually smoother. Downshifting and upshifting, it's another thing I wanted to tell you guys. I noticed it is smoother now. So upshifting, while it was insanely clunky before, and it's still clunky now, I'll admit it, it is much more improved, or noticeably improved over stock. The smoothness from taking off from the light is greatly improved. Even just the tip in and throttle response is more refined, meaning we're getting better throttle response from the bike, just some low throttle inputs, but it's not like a light switch, like an on and off switch. This tip in is still very good, meaning it's very manageable, controllable, it's not jerky when you get on the throttle. It's just a noticeable increase in performance for the throttle response. Even starting the bike up in the morning now is improved. I can tell the idle doesn't wander very high, it stays very low. So for you looking for a more quiet bike in the mornings, or if you get out very early or get up very early at 5 a.m. or something like that, want to start your bike up, it is quieter than stock. So how do we accomplish all this with the tuning? Well, on these newer BMWs like this one, we have two exhaust sensors. So we have the wideband, which is upstream, and the narrowband, which is downstream. The narrowband monitors the wideband, and what we do, as far as stock goes, or let's put it this way, stock, the bike will do small bits of closed loop tuning, meaning it'll read what the wideband says and adjust what the fueling needs to be based on that input, what it's sensing from the exhaust. Now what we do is we enable that system full time, meaning at all times, all throttle positions, you are getting closed loops. We call it full-time closed loop. Meaning anything you do on this bike, any atmospheric condition, especially on an adventure bike like this where you're changing elevations, know that the tuning is changing with the bike. Whereas stock, it does this partially. We command it full time for a specific lambda value. What that means for you is a smoother bike. Now I'll also point out where you guys saw at the top of the graph there, where you don't see a stock, you see this dip where we're making all this power. Now that's an airbox restriction, and that's a telltale sign that we've seen on the K1600, we've seen this on the R1300, we've seen this in the R1250. When you start letting more air get through, more than stock, it requires something better in the airbox to deal with all that extra airflow. Now how we deal with it on the 1250 and the 1300 is simple. We made our own velocity stacks for that bike, installed them, and now we have insane amounts of power. It doesn't falter up top. This thing's breathing through two little straws right here, I can see, and the stacks are probably just made for stock and nothing above that 40% throttle. Now if we get enough response from this Flash, enough people are requesting it, we will put time into R&Ding this bike, pulling the airbox apart, checking the stacks. We have to justify that time. One or two inquiries isn't enough. We need quite a few inquiries for people to go, hey, I'd like to see what you guys can do. And then we'll probably squeeze a little more power out of this platform. It's not going to be insane, but at least we won't have the dip there, and it'll probably carry the power further. We also have the fan temps lower on the engine, which means when the fan comes on, it's a lower temperature than stock. This means the engine stays cooler. If the engine stays cooler, that means the oil stays cooler. If the oil stays cooler, it means it lasts longer and protects your engine better. It's crazy because BMW is always underrating these bikes. This bike, they're claiming 77 horsepower. It made like 71 to the tire stock, and now it's making over 90 wheel horsepower. Crazy. So this bike is now making more power than 850. So this kind of circles back to what I was saying before. If you want the 850, you get the 750 and get a Flash. Now you have beyond what an 850 is as far as power goes. This is the same principle we can use for the F800, F900. While those engines are different, the restrictions are very real, and we can de-restrict those bikes to make them much, much better. Now I'm making my way up to the top end stuff so we can test how this extra power up top feels. Alright, we're at the top end stuff, testing it. The top end it's got a lot of power now. From what this used to be, this is amazing transformation. There's a lot of power. Woo. Wow. It is definitely, I'm gonna change my braking points for sure. It is that much of a change. It's drastic. How we in the turns now? The shifter still is jerky in the turns, not gonna lie, but it is much better than stock. And the power coming out, yes, it's finally there. Let's see how the tip-in is here. Low input throttle. Very good. It doesn't mesh that throttle response. Like, the throttle response works great. They don't change one another. They both complement one another. It's kind of great. So you're getting more throttle response. Wow. But the power is crazy. So you're getting more throttle response, but at the same time, you're also getting better tip-in. It's more smooth. You can really hear this thing open up now. This is crazy fast now. Here we go, we're all in. Wow. Amazing. Tires aren't really meant for this. They're sliding all over the place. How much fun is this? This is a different bike. This is a different bike. I'm having a lot of fun right now. This would be amazing at a track and just destroying leader bikes with just a better tire, of course. This would be so much fun. Now it's time for the Post Flash 20 through 100. We'll see how it stacks up compared to stock. I think it's going to be a big difference. All right, I'm back here with the 750, ready to do the Post Flash 20 through 100. Let's see what she does. All right, 20 through 100. Got more power off the line. Power now carries up top. Carries very well up top. Before we hit that 120 mark, I'm going to exceed that. Look at that. 130. I think we'll call it quits there. And that was a 7.9 20 through 100. A vast improvement over the 9.6 stock. Over a second and a half faster to 20 to 100. The main part of that is, of course, going to be the power we're getting or getting delivered above 5,000 RPM. It is a vast difference in power, so it makes sense that we're seeing a huge gain there on the 20 through 100. I even gave the benefit of the slope to the stock run, and just to show you guys an example here, here's a 10-second run on stock with just less slope. Slope really does matter. In fact, anything over a degree of slope will be considered an invalid run on the GPS because it's too much of an advantage after a degree. And now that I've seen the fuel light here, I can tell you guys definitively that the basic mileage I've been logging on the bike yields the fact that we have no change in gas mileage. Now I'm going to put a little bit of an asterisk next to that, okay? If you get your Flash, throw it in your bike, and you're testing 100% throttle now, your gas gauge is going to go down faster. You're going to use more fuel because we're taking a 40% restriction or 60% restriction and putting the throttle back up to 100% on your request. More air, more fuel means less fuel economy. Now if you cruise the bike normally like you would when you're regularly riding the bike without abusing it or testing the throttle or having a heavy hand, you will see no change in gas mileage. If not, you may have better gas mileage. So I think it's time to wrap up the overview of the bike. It feels like a different bike. If you're kind of bored of your 750 or feel like you've maybe bought the wrong bike because it just doesn't have the power, this is the Flash for you. Even if you don't care about power, you just want smoother throttle, you want that shifter a little less clunky, it is a noticeable improvement over stock. There's quite a few things we tidy up on this bike, including that full-time closed loop, which means this bike is tuning itself at all times, which is another great advantage for people who like to go from low elevation to high elevation and notice some differences in their bike. We always go towards the side of caution, especially on tuning. We want to make sure everything's safe for all of our customers. That's why we test this 100 mile stock, 100 miles Flash. We log a whole lot of things. We do partial throttle runs on the Dyno. We do everything. And I mean, I've even tested cruise control. Cruise control still works just fine right here. We always make sure we test these little things because when you change electronics on a bike, a little change you make could alter another thing on the bike. So we test every little thing. We go over to terrain mode right now and see if that's still operable. sluggish as hell. If I go back to dynamic, got the power back. Yeah. So everything is still functional with the Flash. You're just getting all these advantages. How the bike should have felt stock. So for the people that want the power, this is the Flash for you. For the people that want the rideability, this is also the Flash for you. For those of you that want both, we got you covered. Yeah, this bike feels so much better. Just overall cruising it feels better. Up top feels better. Shifter feels better. Everything feels better about the bike, and that's exactly what we want to see when people spend money on our services and products. We want to make sure you're happy in all aspects of this motorcycle. So I think it's going to do it for this bike. I got to get this thing back to Long Beach, which reminds me, special thanks to Long Beach BMW. They let us borrow this bike to test on it. Got to get it back up there again. Great guys over there. If you want to buy a BMW motorcycle, that's the place to get it. I think it's going to wrap it up, and I'll see you guys in the next one.